Mm-mm. There we go. Alright guys, so in today's video we are going to be talking about functions. Alright, functions are going to show up everywhere in computer science and they're extremely useful. In teaching you guys functions, I want to first show you guys what a function looks like at a high level, and then I'm going to look at each of the parts of the function and map them to a part of how to write a function in Python. So I'm going to map them to their counterparts in programming. So the parts of a function are the input to the function, which we also call parameters, and there can be multiple parameters to a function. We can have x, we can have x1, x2, and then the function, what it does, will take these inputs and will do some work that we will represent with this box. So this box, often known as a black box, is some work that we're doing. And this could be anything from simply multiplying these parameters by 3 and then returning them, or it could be multiplying the parameters together. It could be creating a database. All that matters is that the function will take these inputs and it will produce some output. Let's call that output result. Okay, so I'm also going to take a look at functions from a mathematical point of view in case that helps some viewers. So in math, we have functions usually defined as f of x, at least in the earlier math classes. So f of x, f is the function and x is the input. Now you can have multiple parameters in math functions too. You can have a y or another x. Point is, just like in the graph we saw before, there's a function f, and that function is the work that's being done on the right-hand side of the equation. So like the example I gave before, let's simply multiply x by 3. So this part is kind of like the box that we just created in the previous diagram. Every time you plug in a number into this function, you will get a resulting number. So if we plugged in 2, we would get 6, and that would be our result if we were looking at it in this diagram. Now, let's get into the actual coding part. As usual, I'm going to open up Terminal, and let me zoom in for you guys to see better. And I'm going to go into my desktop directory through my terminal. I'm going to create a file for us to work with. I'm going to name it test. I'm going to open that file with TextEdit, and I'm going to start coding into it. Let me just move some things around. Cool. Now we're ready to start coding. Now let me get into the mapping between the parts that I've been talking about and how to write those parts in Python. And I think it's a good idea to use our mathematical example in this case. So we're going to recreate this function in Python code. So Python gives us the def keyword to create functions. So we're going to do def and then space and then function name. So our function name is simply f, as in this example. And now we have a function named f. However, that's not fully true because we haven't defined the input yet. We haven't defined what we're waiting to be plugged into this function. So we do that in Python by opening and closing a parentheses and by specifying what input we want. In this case, we only want x, or we only want one input, and we named it x. Then I'm going to open a colon, and now we have a function, except something's still missing. If you look at our previous example, it's more apparent. We see that the result part is missing. So in this code block, what we're going to do is we're going to calculate some result by doing some work specified by these dots. Not going to define what the work is yet, but we're going to also, at the end of the function, return that result. And in Python, we get this result by typing in return and then the value that we want to return. In our case, it's the value of the variable result. Now, this is a good generic form of a function. So every function looks to some degree like this. Every function has a function header, which is the definition of its names and what inputs it takes. Every function has some work that's done to it, and every function has a result that is returned. Just like I said earlier, now we just see it in code. Same exact thing. Now let's define exactly, in our case, what this work is. The work in our case is simply multiplying by 3, so 3x, exactly like what we see in our math function. So just like in our example before, we want to get an actual value by doing work with our function. And to do that, we call our function. To call our function, we have to type in the function name, then we open and close the parentheses again, except this time we give it actual concrete values. Then what's going to happen is our code is going to literally jump to the line that is the start of the function, and then it's going to start executing this line. So imagine our program got all the way down here. What's going to happen is we're going to jump back to this line of code and start executing, except we're going to substitute the input with the inputs that we gave the function. So for example, we're going to take this 2, we're going to put it in a result by multiplying it by 3, then we're going to return the result. And then what happens is that Python's going to come back to this line that we're in and replace this with the result, which is 6. Now, let's say we wanted to store this inside of a variable. Like I just said, Python's eventually going to do this code, and then it's going to jump back here and then replace this with 6. So answer will be 6. And that is exactly what we see. Now, there's something that I want you guys to get really comfortable with, and this is a sign of an experienced programmer, I'd say. So I want you guys to get comfortable with taking a function call and putting it wherever we want to put it. So for example, instead of saving f of 2 to a variable named answer, we'll print out f of 2 immediately. And I want you guys to know that what Python is going to do in the background is going to replace this function call with the value that it needs to be. So if you guys are comfortable with that, then you should also get comfortable with this, and then with this. So again, Python's going to look at the innermost function call. It's going to substitute that. Then it's going to look at this. It's going to substitute that. And it's going to look at this. And I've gotten past what I can do mentally. But we should get an answer for this too. Let me see, we do. And this is all I have to say for functions for now. But this is not all that there is to be said. Maybe I'll make another video in the future getting more in detail with functions. But I hope you guys learned a lot and got comfortable looking at a function and its parts and knowing how a function works now. Thanks for tuning in, and you should watch my next video in classes after this.